Welcome to Morning Infusion with Dr. V, where we are intentional about connecting you with leaders that have overcome so that you know that the possibilities are endless. It's Dr. V here, where our coaching program teaches nurses to work from their computers anywhere around the world, making money and owning their own time. Our featured guest today is Kayla Sullivan. Kayla Sullivan is 23 years old and has been a nurse for just over 2 years now. She currently works in a hospital setting and participates in several councils and extra activities. She is set to graduate in December from ECU with her BSN. Go Pirates! She chose nursing to make an impact in people's lives, and hopes to continue to do that as she reaches for her ultimate goal, which is to receive her FNP/DNP and open an independent primary care practice to serve the community around her. So welcome, welcome, welcome. Thank you for showing up today.
Thank you.
So now you recently became a nurse. Now we explored the primary reason why you became a nurse. So tell us some of the other reasons
Sure.
that you became a nurse.
So in high school, I loved math and science. So that's kind of what got me in the field of something to do with those two topics. And I had always had a passion for serving other people in whatever, way it was. And I attribute most of that to the church growing up, volunteering and things like that. And so to impact people, I realized that bedside is where I needed to start, something that I could actually be hands-on with the patient, touch them physically, touch them mentally, touch them emotionally, spiritually, what have you. And so that's kind of what led me to nursing. Choosing NASH was pretty specific for me. I wanted to give back to the community that has given to me for the last 18 years. And I felt that it was a respectful choice to start and give back where I had been given from before I started trying anything else.
I think it's important that, what you said about starting at the bedside, because I was talking to Dr. Kiana Jones last night. So she started at the bedside. She said when she came out of nursing, she said she didn't like bedside. She said, but she knew that it was important for her to start at the bedside in order to really, really understand what the nurse has to go through in order to be in that leadership position that she so desired to be in. So I think that's important. I love that. So now, what is some advice you would give someone that is going into nursing school?
Into nursing school, be ready. It's not a game. It's a life decision that is going to take a lot out of you. But the end goal will be valuable. Okay, so when you reach your goal of graduating and becoming the nurse that you desire to be, all the work that you've put in will be worth it. But you have to be willing to put the work in. It's not, just come as you go and kind of halfway do things. That's not going to prepare you to be a professional nurse, a safe nurse, and you're not going to be the best nurse you can be unless you put forth 100% effort in nursing school. And 100% effort in nursing school means pretty much devoting just about all of you to nursing school. You have to be willing to learn the material. You have to be willing to mess up and learn from your mistakes. And you have to be willing to push yourself in the clinical setting to learn things you've never done and maybe even be uncomfortable in doing those things so that you can do them for a patient one day when it's just you and them standing in the room. And it's a lot. It's a lot. So be prepared. Don't think you're going to go in there and spend 40% of your time in school and the other 60% doing whatever you want, because that's not how nursing school works.
I love it. Now, when you said, because nurses are perfectionists, right? We try, that's, so I value what you said, because you said, that you're gonna mess up sometimes. Right. And I think that that's one thing that I don't think that nurses really they grasp, right? It's that, and, and I struggle with it as well. Right. I think we all do. Right. Because it is failure. But one of the things that is key, I think, is understanding that failure is not final, right? And being very intentional about, just connecting with the leaders who are in your unit, right? So that you are less likely to make the failures. And that is key, right? That is key. Because what happens is when you don't connect with those people, they're there for you. They're there to say, okay, you didn't do this or you didn't do that, right? Let's go back to the drawing board and let's figure that thing out, right? I remember one time this guy came in and just, protection, right? I remember this one time this guy came in and he, and of course this wasn't anything that was life threatening, but he put up a bag of fluid that was really not ordered. And just because I know the flow of how fluids are ordered and the reasons why they're ordered, lactated ringers, normal saline, half normal saline, I knew that he had the wrong bag. I mean, I instantly, like literally when you're in that space, right, you can look up and you're like, that ain't right. And so I looked up and I was like, that's not right. And I was like, you know what? I said, he ordered something else, and I pulled him out of the room, right? And I said, and I told a little bit of a fib, like in front of the patient, when, he ordered, a different thing on, I just wanted to let you know that. And so the patient, didn't know that because it wasn't going to hurt the patient at the end of the day, right? Lactated ringers over normal saline is not going to kill the patient. But at the end of the day, you want to make sure that you're protective of your nurses and that you pour back into your nurses, right? That is huge. Now, what is some advice you would give someone going into nursing for the first time?
I always say humility. So, I go back to the perfectionist thing. In high school, I wanted straight A's, I wanted the best I could be at everything. And that's a good goal to have, right? You want to strive to be the best self that you can be. And when it transitioned into the field of nursing, I quickly realized that the only way that I was going to be as perfect, God didn't make us perfect, we'll never be perfect. But in order to strive for perfect, I had to understand what I did not know. And I had to understand that I'm not always going to know. I will never know everything, and there will always be somebody who knows more than I do. And I strived to find that person. And, it started off as your preceptor. You get linked with someone who's been doing this for a while. Since you're a new grad, you've never done 85% of what you're venturing in the world to do. And even after I graduated, by myself, no longer had to have a preceptor. I work in a 2-nurse unit. And so I made it a very intentional thing for me to say to the nurses that I was working with, I know that you've been doing this for years longer than I have. And so I'm always going to come to you when there's a question because I respect the fact that you know more than I do in some situations. And I think that sometimes when you lack the humility to admit when you don't know, that's when you become an unsafe nurse. Because I think prideful nurses who are unwilling to step aside and ask for help are a danger to the patient. And
Yes.
I do not want to be that person. I do not want to be that nurse.
You're so smart. I love it. I love it. I love it. Like you said so much in that because one of the things that you said was that to have the humility. And so, when we're doing the disc assessment talks about, your D's, your I's, S, and your C's. And so with a disc assessment, most nurses are D's, right?
Mm-hmm.
Most nurses are get it done, get it done, get it done. Now you have your ICU nurses who are your C's who wants to get it done right every single solitary time.
Mm-hmm.
But because you're D's, you're right. What D's think is that your way is the right way. I'm high D, low I, right? And so but you want to get it done all the time. So you're consistent about getting it done.
Mm-hmm.
But what you did whenever you went to the nurses is you showed that humility. And that's the way in which you work with D's, right? Is to show that humility with them. And you did that without even really knowing that was what you were doing, right? And so that is so, so valuable. And I always say that, there is never, ever, ever. The only question that is a stupid question is the question that goes unasked.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And that is so, so true whenever you're in nursing, because what we're dealing with is we're dealing with lives. At the end of the day, right, we want to make sure that we're not doing something that is going to harm our patients. And I mean, it is so, so key that whenever you come out of school, that you have learned that on the front end of things, right? And not just learn that, but learn that your resources. And so I'm sure that what has happened is you have not failed as much, right? Because of the fact that you have went to your resources and shown that humility. And then they are like, okay, I like this girl. I like her. So that's the key, right? Because nurses either young, they can
Yep,
be,
absolutely.
they can be that nurse that eats their young, and you don't want to be that nurse. You want to be that nurse that is supportive. Like I remember one nurse used to come to me, and it was so funny. It was a paralytic, and she used to come to me, and she said that this other nurse she would get so upset with this nurse. The reason why she was upset with the nurse for asking the question was because the nurse didn't have the humility behind her like you did. Okay. That's part of the reason why. And so she would ask the question, over and over and over again. Well, when you're doing RSI, which is rapid sequence intubation, right? You ain't got time. If I ask you a question, I'm gonna need for you to answer it right now. Okay. We ain't got time to be waiting, right? And so she would answer, I would be like, look, my friend, I'm gonna need for you to answer the question and then come back and educate her later, right? To get to that next point. So anyway, that's so key. I love it. I love it. So now what are some of the things that surprised you about nursing that different from your educational journey?
Ooh. I would say there's a lot. Learning nursing in the textbook and being a nurse in real life, I feel like are vastly different. And I think a lot of that just plays into the part of the fact that there are patients involved. You can never write in a textbook what every patient is going to say or feel or do or how they're going to act. Just like you can't always know how a patient's going to respond to a treatment or to a therapy. It's up in the air. It really is. And I think that was one of the hardest things to grasp as a new nurse, was that you cannot be a nurse by the textbook 100% of the time. Sometimes you have to take the information that you learned from the textbook and put it into practice, yes, so that you're accurate, evidence-based practice, but you can't necessarily do it 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. You might have to
Right.
do it 2, 1, 6. It might just be different that day. And a very perfectionist type A/personality, that was something I had to learn how to deal with. Was it's not always going to be the same. It's not always going to be what you would consider normal, what may have you. It's very up in the air, and that was a big thing for me. And then also patient noncompliance was something that I started to grasp early in my career. That plays a hard part in what we do as bedside nurses. When you want to educate your patient, they're leaving the hospital, this is what you should do and this is what you should not do, and you know that they're not going to follow the directions that you're giving to you, and you want them to, and you want to understand what you need to say or what you need to do to get them to be compliant, but some patients just aren't going to be compliant. And when you care like you should care as a nurse, that hurts you in your soul, because they're going to come back and they're going to be at harm's way again. So noncompliance was something that I didn't realize was quite as prominent as it is.
I think that you said something key, and I was actually thinking that same thing. So whenever you have a patient who is not quote unquote non-compliant, right? So I used to think that, right? So when I first came out of school, I used to think, you have high blood pressure, you have diabetes, we're just going to throw some medicine at you and you'll be all right, right? And then I remember going into patients' rooms, and I was like, if you don't take your blood pressure medicine, then you're going to have a stroke. I mean, that would literally be the thing that I would say when I first walked into the room.
Right.
Until this lady said to me one day, she said, I thought that you were not going to be nice to me. Because of the fact because of how I came off at the beginning, first impressions, right? And so, but of course, throughout the rest of the visit, I was super nice, right? But the reality is that, so if you really think about this, if you think about the side effects of medications, for example, right? So if you think about the fact that there is a medication that they give, high blood pressure medicine, this is just one example. There's many, but this is just one example. A high blood pressure medicine that they give to patients that they also use as an off-label use for children with ADHD, right? And so if they're giving it to children with ADHD, then it calms them down, right? And so when you're already, those children are up here, right? And so you're calming them down to here. But if you're here and then you bring you down to here, I mean, it's like you're literally, you are not operating at your normal level that you should be. And so, I mean, I can see how they're non-compliant. I can see how, and and what I have told my patients is, you have to really, really be intuitive about really figuring out how to leverage yourself and make sure that you are going back to your physician, telling your physician about these side effects and trying something different that could possibly help you. It is key, key, key. I love it. So now, what are some of the key elements to having an awesome nursing team?
Collaboration is the first thing I'm going to say. Communication and collaboration. You cannot um, run a unit or run a team without communication. It's nearly impossible because in order for multiple pieces of the unit to function together, they have to communicate. You can't be, you're over here going down this lane and you're going down this lane, and the lanes are never going to come back together. That
Right.
work. The lanes got to come back. They got to merge. You got to have one final goal and get there together. Um, so communication is key. And I think that strengths and weaknesses are something that we don't talk about enough. So for example, like we have huddle or we have, debriefings after a code blue or rapid response or, whatever it is that you sit down and you say, okay, let's talk about what happened. And let's talk about what we didn't do and what we could have done and what we did do good. And I think it's important in a team, especially a team of nurses, that you know who is proficient at this and who is very proficient at this, because you can't have 6 leaders all trying to run the crash cart and then nobody's doing anything else. And that goes for any situation, not just code blue, but every nurse is, familiar with a code. In whatever you're doing, you have to have people adequately doing each part so that each part gets done and the patient benefits from the whole, whatever it is you're doing, even if it's something super simple. And so I think that the only way that you can do that and know that is by talking with your team and knowing who is very good at this, who's not so good at this. Let's lift that person up. Let's let them be what they're good at, and you take what you're good at so that we all benefit the patient.
I love that. And one of the things about the emergency department that I think is very different than, because, that's my stomping ground, that's very different about other units is that most of the time, well, not most of the time, sometimes whenever a patient comes in, the patient comes in and we know that the patient is going to be a code, right? And I always say that code blues are ran in the emergency, like they boss it out, like they do a phenomenal job, right? Because of the fact that whenever the patient comes in, like I'm like I'll start the IV. You determine who's going to do what at the beginning, and so whenever they come in, everybody knows what their job is. Everybody knows exactly what they need to do, and then they're jumping on that one thing in order to be more effective and efficient with the patient. But I think that works as well throughout the organization, right? So whenever you have, and we were talking before we came on camera about you being a part of all these committees. And I think people, they really don't leverage that, right? They don't leverage that, being a part of the committee, because in these committees, in these spaces, you are making decisions. You are helping the organization make decisions. You are the bedside nurse, right? You are the one who helps the organization see, well, okay, well, this is different. Like when we moved from the old ER to the new ER, things were different, right? And so understanding the unique barriers that you have as a bedside nurse is huge, right? And so I love the fact that what you said about ensuring that what your strengths and what your weaknesses are. I love it. So now you had an interaction with a patient that blessed you. Tell us about that.
Yeah, so my family, my mom, my dad, my brother, and my sister live in a different country. They moved for mission reasons and they live in a different country. And they were supposed to leave right at the beginning of COVID. Like literally, they were supposed to leave and then COVID happened. And we all know how COVID has been since it started. And so obviously, one of the things that it did was it placed a travel ban on leaving, one country to go to another because we wanted to contain where we were. And so they were stopped from leaving and they had already sold all of their stuff. So at the same time that I was trying to, just like everyone else, deal with COVID in my personal life, we were trying to figure out where they were going to go, what they were going to do, and we were dealing with COVID at work. And COVID at work was a whole, situation for all of us. We all had to dig deep and figure out how we were going to keep ourselves safe, keep ourselves sane, and take care of our patients. And so had all that going on at once. And we did that for a couple of months. And then about 7 or 8 months into COVID, they finally got the okay. Hey, if you're going to go here and live and you're not going to come back and forth, we're going to let you go. So they were set to go. And of course I wanted to go with them, take them to the airport, wave goodbye, and it just didn't work out that way. My work schedule didn't allow for it. And even though I have great coworkers who were trying to figure out how it would work, it just didn't work. And so I remember getting to work that night and thinking, Lord, I cannot get through this 12 hours on my own. I just can't. I'm thinking about, is their plane okay? Did they make it to Raleigh? Did they get on it? And thinking about, when am I going to see you again? I miss you. And I said, but there are 5 patients waiting for me inside this unit that are counting on me to be their eyes and their ears and take care of them for the next 12 hours. And so I walked in, I sat down, I got report, I stood there for a second. And I always go see, I'm very strategic about who my first patient is, whether it be because they're the sickest or they're a fall risk or whatever it is. I kind of prioritize who I'm going to say hello to first. And so this night it was a particular little elderly woman. And I walked in and all I said was, good evening, my name's Kayla. I'm going to be your nurse today. How are you? And she stopped and looked me dead in the eye and said, do you believe in Jesus? And you know how you have moments where you feel like your whole body just stopped and you don't really know what to do next? And I said, well, yes, ma'am, I do. And she said, I feel like you need to be prayed for. Oh. And in that moment, I didn't know what to say. I could feel the tears start to well up in my eyes. And I said, well,
and I know this story because you done told it to me, and I swear I'm crying again. Go ahead.
I said, how did you know that? But I didn't even say yes. I just said, how did you know that? And she said, sometimes, honey, you just have to follow what the Spirit tells you to do. And so she just starts praying. She grabbed me with her little tiny hand by the hand and started praying. And the whole time she's praying, I'm crying. And I'm thinking, Lord, you are so intentional that you placed this sweet little lady in my room. You knew that the day shift nurse would give her to me. You knew that I would go see her first. And you knew that you were going to use your Spirit to give her the strength to speak to me when I'm supposed to be the one taking care of her. And in her prayer, she said, I never even told her what was wrong. And in her prayer, she said, Lord, I know that I'm not her only patient. And I know that other patients might not understand. So will you give her the strength she needs to get through her shift? And will you touch those patients and help them to be nicer than they would have been without you? And when she said amen, the tears were, I was thinking,
see, I'm over here. I cannot see.
At her and I said, honey, I called her name and I said, ma'am, you just touched me in a way that I did not anticipate and did not know was possible. And I think a lot of times we are so quick to think about how we're helping the patients, and we are, that we forget that sometimes the patients help us. And it doesn't have to be that extreme. If you just listen to your patient, you may learn something about a medicine or a medical process or how patients deal with things just by simply listening. And I think sometimes we push away what patients have to offer to us as well.
I love that story. I swear, I hate that it just, how it elicits that, oh, Lord have mercy. Okay, we're going to get away from that story right there.
Oh, man.
So you want to eventually seek your DNP. Now, what was the rationale for seeking your DNP over your PhD?
So I worked, before I got my nursing license, in a primary care practice with a family friend / churchgoer who owns a practice in Wilson that is non-traditional, is the word I will use. It's not traditional insurance, and it's available more to people who might not seek out medical attention if this wasn't available to them. And I didn't, I took the job because I wanted a job in healthcare before I became a nurse. I didn't really take it with the intention of it affecting me as much as it did, maybe. But when I started working there and I began to see how many patients just sit at home and don't seek out any kind of treatment until it's the last dire effort, and then they show up in the ER like about to die on the floor because they can't afford it, or because they didn't feel like if they went to a traditional place that they would be treated with respect because they don't follow, again, because they can't afford it. And so I started to see these patients, and make connections with them and see how them coming to a provider, their health was changing, their attitude was changing. And I was just amazed. I was just floored. And his particular practice allows him to devote more time to his patients because he's the boss, he's in charge. And seeing patients who have been seeing a doctor for 14 or 15 years already come in and start seeing him and just seeing the change in their face and how they understand. And they want to be compliant. They want to come back and call, hey, this isn't working, or this is happening, or what do I do with this? And just seeing that start to have an effect on a continuation in their medical care blew my mind. And so once I became a nurse and I started seeing the downfalls that can occur in traditional medicine, I said, this is what I want. Like, I want to get my NP so that I can practice with the patients and be one of their providers. But I also want to get my doctorate in order to own a practice, start a practice, and network within those practices to offer care to those who don't have it and find them so that they don't have to find us. That's really what I want. I want to help break the gap that is lack of access to medical care.
I love the fact that, because I go to the particular physician practice that you're talking about. And one of the things that he does really well, and I'm just going to say is Dr. Parker.
Absolutely.
Yes, because he's very good at really sitting down and explaining. I mean, even as a nurse, right? Even as a nurse. And I think that having that time and having that model, where he doesn't charge insurance is huge, huge, huge. And he's just a really, really good guy. So I like that model. And so I live in Rocky Mount, but I will go to Wilson, to a physician practice because of that time. Because when I walk in that office, I get seen. My time is my most valuable asset. And so I don't need to sit in your office for 20 hours to see you. I need to go there. You need to see me, and then I need to leave, right? And that's what happens. So I love it. Now tell us about a book that has been impactful in your life.
This may sound cliche, but I'm just going to say the Bible.
It's not cliche at all.
I was raised in a household where that was something that was at the forefront since I was a child. And then it was a choice at an age where I understood, to choose to continue to follow that. And I would not have made it through nursing school had it not been for the Lord. That I don't doubt that at all, not 1 second. Because his strength is what got me through the hard nights and the hard days and not thinking I could do it, or, really hard patience or whatever. Like, literally, if I did not have the Lord and his scripture, I would not have made it through nursing school. And anybody that knows me and saw me go through nursing school would be like, praise the Lord, she's telling the truth. I mean, really. And so there are lots of books, and I've read lots of books I love to read. I go to the beach, just hand me a book, let me sit there, I'm good for the day. But of all the books, even though they're great and you can learn from them, you can't learn anything better than you can in scripture. And that's a book that I've been reading since I was 5, and I will read until the day I die. And I will still continue to learn each time I open it and read it, even if it's the same passage 14 days in a row.
That's right.
If you're reading it with the right mindset, then the Lord will show you something new.
That's right. That's right. And it's impactful, and the thing about the Bible as well is that the Bible is all the leadership principles that you get outside all of them are in the Bible. I mean, you can link them all back to every last one of them back to the Bible. Mm-hmm. So now, lastly, but not least, who is a person who has influenced your life, and why were they so impactful?
I'm going to go back to, I have a lot. Obviously, my mom and dad would be a huge influence in my life in general. But speaking specifically to my medical life, I give that credit to Dr. Parker, 100%. No questions asked, because I saw in him leadership styles that were respectful and professional. And I saw in him a work ethic that I don't see in many physicians. And I saw compassion and care that you also don't see in many physicians. He does not do what he does to make money. He does not do what he does to look good or be high up and have people praise him. He does it because he cares about his patients and he cares about their well-being. And you can see that in how he acts and how he runs his business and in how his patients interact with him. If you have patients who are willing to pay over top of their insurance premiums just so that he will be their physician, that speaks volumes. And
I'm here. I'm here as one of those people.
when I, when I worked underneath of him, I told him many times I was so thankful for how he influenced me, but I don't think he really understood how much he did. Because now my entire professional goal is to be like him and to care like him and to work with our community like he does. I think it's extremely respectful and very, very good for our community.
I love it. Thank you, Kayla. You've been a pleasure, just a pleasure. So we just finished our VP Nursing Business Academy 4-day masterclass. It was such a phenomenal event. You still have time to sign up for VP Nursing Business Academy. The last day is July 5th, 2021. We can jump on a call so that you can gain clarity on how to create multiple streams of income, or you can sign up at vpnursing.com. We've got a short video as you link the pages so that you can see kind of how you can make money from your computer. And so, our intention has always been connecting you with leaders that have overcome, such as Kayla. So thank you, Kayla, for showing up so so that the audience knows that their possibilities are limitless. You guys have a phenomenal rest of your day.